Hi, I'm Mary.
And I'm Katie, and this is The Housewife Did It.
True Crime Edition. And I have a cough drop in my mouth.
Good
Why I
thing you don't
sound
have
like
to
that.
tell it. Welcome, True Crime Edition.
Yes.
Been sitting on this case for a little bit. Do you have any real-time true crime? Other than that the U.S. government is kidnapping people who are here legally, which is a crime.
Today, I found a dog, a puppy, maybe like 6 weeks old, tied up by a shoestring to the fence outside of our school. That's a crime.
Post-flood.
Post-flood.
Crazy.
Criminal.
All
right. He was very cute.
He was. Well, I have plenty of crimes for you today.
Multiple crimes?
Multiple crimes. Lots of multiple. All right, you ready? The starting is always the weirdest part. The Highway of Tears is a 719-kilometer section of Highway 16 in British Columbia, Canada. It stretches between the cities of Prince Rupert and Prince George, and it has earned this name because it has been the location of violent crimes against many women and girls. Specifically, there's a disproportionately high number of Indigenous women and girls that have had violence committed upon them along this highway. Documented concerns about the frequency of missing people along the highway began in the 1970s and have continued to today. For some context, 720 kilometers is about 466 miles, which is further than the driving distance between St. Louis, Missouri and Omaha, Nebraska, about the flying distance between St. Louis and Minneapolis, Minnesota, and it is further than Memphis, Tennessee to Helen, Georgia. So, think of all those places. That's your context.
I don't know where the fuck Helen, Georgia is.
Is it farther than you would want to go?
I don't know.
Okay. Is Georgia like right next door to you, Mary?
No, it's right below me.
No, that's Mississippi.
Yes. No, it's touching. It's right next to Alabama, and Alabama's right next to Mississippi.
Not right below you.
Oh, me personally. No, you're right.
I said Memphis, Tennessee to Helen, Georgia.
Okay.
In 1971, 18-year-old Jean Virginia Samperi, known as Ginny, went missing outside of Gitzagookla in British Columbia. She and her cousin Alan were walking along the highway near a railroad overpass when her cousin decided to take his bike back to get his jacket. When he returned, she was gone. As he was approaching where he had last seen her, he heard a car door shut, but then he didn't see a car or see his cousin ever again. 40 years later, and there are still no clues as to what happened to Ginny. Ginny was of Gitxsan descent. She had been known as a caretaker of her 5 other siblings, although she was the youngest. She protected them when their father would drink too much. All of her friends and family said that she did not participate in any high-risk behaviors and that she had big plans for her future. Her boyfriend had actually gone missing shortly before her, and his remains were found after she went missing. He had drowned in the Skeena River nearby in British Columbia. Corrine Thomas was 21 years old in 1976 when she was killed. Thomas was an Indigenous woman from the Saikous First Nation, which was known at the time as the Stony Creek Band. She was 9 months pregnant that July. She was struck and killed by a car driven by Richard Redekop. It is said that both Corrine and Richard were intoxicated at the time of the collision. However, I must note, Corinne was walking, not driving a car.
She's also 9 months pregnant.
Well, alcohol is going to be a recurring theme here. For people who should not be drinking, but such is life. But she was not operating a motor vehicle.
Sure.
The police received a statement from 2 young witnesses that Corinne had been playing chicken with Richard's car, but those witnesses would later claim that they were coerced into giving those statements. The coroner on this case was later removed when it was revealed that he had worked on a previous case that had left Richard Redekop with lesser charges after Richard had killed an Indigenous man in a hit and run 10 years earlier. Let me add some more irony to this, Mary. The coroner had also presided over a case 2 years earlier in which Corinne Thomas's cousin was killed, also in a vehicle incident, by Redekop's younger brother. These dudes are just out here hunting Indigenous people with their cars. No charges were brought against Richard Redekop for this incident No charges were brought against Richard Redekop for this incident, so Corinne's father proceeded with criminal negligence charges, which in Canada can be brought forth by private citizens. Dope. That was almost a year later. However, the charges were dismissed due to insufficient evidence because of those 2 witnesses that said she was playing chicken. Even though those witnesses basically retracted their statements. In 1981, 36-year-old Jean Mary Kovacs' nude body was found in a ditch in Prince George. She had died from 4 gunshot wounds to the head. A man was gathering firewood near Purdon Lake when he found her body. A little before midnight on October 10th, Jean had been kicked out of a bar in Prince George after drinking for several hours. She went home and drank some more before taking a taxi out of the city. She did not drive. The taxi dropped her at an intersection where Jean said she would hitch a ride to Edmonton. She had armed herself with a knife, so she felt like she was prepared. Over the following months, though, there were thousands of suspects, but investigators were no closer to making an arrest. In 1986, a woman came forward and told the police that she knew that her boyfriend had been involved in this and 2 other murders. Edward Dennis Isaac pled guilty to murdering Jean Mary Kovac and also 2 young girls, Rosvita Fuchsbichler. I knew I would struggle. I put the pronunciations and I still struggle. Rosvita Fuchsbichler, who was 13 years old, was picked up while hitchhiking after an evening of partying. Edward Isaac strangled, stabbed, and sexually mutilated Rosvita before dumping her body. Her body was found by joggers a week later. 15-year-old Nina Joseph was also strangled and stabbed to death. Nina Joseph was a sexually exploited teen and found herself with Edward Isaac in the capacity of sex work that night. When Nina refused to participate in a certain sex act, Edward strangled her with the cord of her own jacket. This time, he enlisted the help of his girlfriend to dispose of Nina's body. Never a good idea, buddy. Especially if you're not going to be good to her for the rest of her life. He enlisted the help of his girlfriend to dispose of the body, where they tied her legs to 2 trees, leaving her in a spread eagle position to be found. Edward Isaac is not the only Canadian serial killer who used the highway as both the place to find victims and to dispose of them, but more to come on that later. Alberta Williams disappeared at 24 years old in August of 1989. She was last seen in a pub in Prince Rupert with her sister Claudia. Weeks later, her body was found nude near the Tyee Overpass, 23 miles from Prince Rupert. She had been strangled and sexually assaulted. An RCMP officer, RCMP is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. An RCMP officer
Wait,
said...
it's mounted?
Oh, yeah. That would scare me. Yeah,
Past
mounted.
tense of mount?
Because
Not
they're like...
mountain?
No, because they're mounted on horses. They're the mounted police.
I thought they were mountain police.
Mounted. So an RCMP officer said that shortly before her body was found, bloody clothes matching the description of Alberta's clothes had been found in the Prince Rupert ferry terminal, but they had actually already disposed of these clothes because they didn't realize the importance of the bloody clothes until her body was found.
No, of course.
It does seem rather quick, given that, like, they probably had a description of what she was wearing that day when they went looking for her, and those clothes would have matched that description. They're also bloody clothes.
Yeah.
Maybe we should just hold on to those.
Like, you're not concerned?
No, I guess not. In 2016, we're going to jump ahead for just a second. In 2016, nearly 30 years later, a former investigator on her case gave a tip to the CBC, which is the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. This officer's information helped the CBC News produce an 8-part podcast series about her death called Who Killed Alberta Williams? So, that exists. Later in 1989, though, Marnie Blanchard, 18 at the time, was standing outside of a bar in Prince George when a witness saw her get into a gray Nissan truck with a man. Almost 3 weeks later, her skeletal remains were found by a cross-country skier. Skeletal because she had been out amongst wildlife. In 1990, police had a suspect named Brian Peter Arp, and they found Marnie Blanchard's jewelry inside of his gray Nissan truck. A few years later, in 1993, Teresa Umphrey went missing from a convenience store around 2 to 3 a.m. Her body was found the next day, nude and partially frozen in a snowbank. She had died by manual strangulation. Brian Arp was also her killer, but he would not be sentenced for the murders until 1995. At one point, near the highway, an entire family even went missing. A mother, father, 9 and 4-year-old. It is no surprise that the Indigenous population in Canada, but especially those surrounding the highway, do not much trust the police. The RCMP were significantly more likely to arrest Indigenous people for nonviolent crimes. Jessica McDiarmid, in her book Highway of Tears, said that sometimes the police were met with open hostility, but always with caution. And she wrote a lot about, like, kind of these, like, instances where, like, outside of bars, like, the police would, like, round up and arrest, like, a bunch of Indigenous people, and then, like, literally just, like, let all the white people go. So, you know.
Sounds about right.
That's racism. Indigenous women make up 35% of Canada's federal prison population, which is 5 times the rate of Indigenous women in the population. Children from First Nations families are not only more likely to be in the system, meaning like foster care in the custody of the state, but they are also more likely to face sexual abuse in the system. Based on official reports, there are 145 incidents per 121 children.
My God.
But the current rates are only based on children who report at the time of the abuse. The state has no process to track people who report the abuse after becoming adults, but who were in the system at the time of the abuse. It also should be noted that these numbers could be affected by the fact that the suicide rates of Indigenous youth are 6 times higher than that of non-Indigenous youth.
Wow.
So if they get abused and they even live to report it. That is.
Yeah.
Matilda Wilson, in her childhood, had been kidnapped from her home and shipped off to a residential school. The publicly stated goal of Canadian residential schools is to kill the Indian in the child.
Oh.
More than 150,000 children, like Matilda, were forced into these schools between 1883 and 1997. You heard that right, folks. Where they were made to do manual labor, receive religious instruction, and be forced into cultural assimilation. The official number of children who are known to have died while in the custody of these schools is over 4,000. And this is like, you kind of, maybe not you, whoever's listening, but we, the world, has heard of these like mass graves being found in Canada from the residential schools. So like this number of 4,000 is like really only like what we have dug up.
Right.
So, and like they find sometimes like 1,000 at a time. So it's like, I cannot even fathom. Matilda, though, made it home and she started a family. Ramona Wilson was Matilda's sixth child, who came after Matilda was told she wouldn't be able to conceive any more children. So she was so excited.
Yeah.
Ramona Wilson was born into a family, a part of the Gittin Max Band. On June 11th, 1994, when Ramona was 16 years old, she left her home in Smithers around 9 p.m. She had spent the night with her mom and brother watching TV before heading out to go to a dance with her friends. She was headed to Hazleton, and she likely would have attempted to hitchhike. The highway itself was a short walk from her house, but Hazleton was about 40 miles away, so she would need a ride, for sure. For Indigenous people with minimal opportunities and like financial struggles, who were often facing poverty, hitchhiking was a super common way of traveling. Even hitchhiking on this very scary highway.
No.
Ramona never showed up to the dance, but no one panicked. Her best friend Crystal just assumed she had changed her plans. It's 1994. Can't just shoot a text. Even on Sunday, many people thought that she had just decided to have a sleepover or hang out with some other friends than the ones she'd originally planned. But when she didn't make it to school Monday morning, everyone started to worry. After school, Ramona also failed to show up to her shift for work at a local restaurant. But police told the family she'd probably be back. She is, in fact, just a teenager. And they just do this. At one point during the investigation, police reported some evidence that led them to believe that Ramona made it to an apartment complex before heading back to the dance, but that she was run over by a car. The evidence, I don't have it. They also said that they followed a lead that she had stopped to join a party at a nearby rugby field. Another rumor was that she was headed to Morristown, which is now has been changed back to an Indigenous name, so it's now called Whitsett, to see friends for a graduation weekend, but none of these theories have ever led anywhere tangible. Ramona's best friend was a white girl named Crystal Grinke, who said that she was shocked that it was Ramona who went missing, when Ramona rarely, if ever, put herself in vulnerable situations, at least not in the way that Crystal herself did. Like, we can all, in hindsight, say, like, hitchhiking, vulnerable.
Yeah.
But Crystal's like, no, you didn't know me.
Yeah.
Like, I was getting into some shit.
Yeah.
Crystal says, I always thought I was the more likely one to get hurt. But then she wondered if her own safety was related to her whiteness. That's a great thing to wonder, Crystal. Nearly a year later, in April 1995, people on ATVs came across Ramona's body in the woods behind the Smithers Airport, only a few kilometers from her home. While her family waited to find Ramona, two 15-year-old girls vanished from Prince George, Roxanne Tiara, and Alicia Germain. Roxanne disappeared between July and August of 1994. She had also befriended Crystal Grinke while she was incarcerated at a youth detention center for an unknown petty offense.
Mhm.
Roxanne's foster mother, Mildred, would eventually be given legal guardianship, but Roxanne still spent most of her time away from home after her incarceration at age 12. Roxanne was... Huh?
My goodness.
I know. Roxanne was a sexually exploited teen who engaged in survival sex while living on her own with friends in Prince George. Mildred said, though, that Roxanne kept in touch. She would stop by the house every few days, or at the very least, she called every day. In June of that year, Roxanne told Mildred that she wanted to enter a rehab facility soon and then pursue her dreams of becoming a fashion designer. She said, I'm ready. They made the appointment for a drug treatment program. At the end of June, Roxanne said, I got to head back to Prince George where I've been staying with my friends and I got to get all my belongings. But this is the last time Mildred saw her. There are reports from a friend of hers in downtown Prince George that one day in July, Roxanne said she would be going out with a customer that night. The friend watched her walk around a building, and that is the last she saw of her. If true, then Roxanne did return to her life in Prince George, at least for a month, before actually going missing. I don't know. I feel like I question, like, maybe she felt like she needed to get a little more money before she, like, committed to this endeavor. And she's like, let me just hustle a little bit more and, like, then I'll go. Or it's possible that she has an addiction and she fell right back into it and then something happened. Or I guess it's possible that her friend didn't see this. So Mildred started hanging up flyers around downtown Prince George and handing them out to neighbors. Roxanne wasn't reported missing until August 11th, even though the last time Mildred had seen her was in June. But her body was found 6 days after the missing report, dumped in a bush along Highway 16. Alicia Germain's story may sound a lot like Roxanne's. She had a tumultuous home life, and she had left home to be on her own at 12 years old. She had been living on the streets, becoming addicted to drugs, and being sexually exploited. But as 1994 was coming to an end, she had expressed to her mom that she wanted to get help for her addictions and she wanted to go back to high school. On December 9th, the Prince George Native Friendship Center was having a Christmas party for kids living on the streets, where they were served a Christmas dinner and given gifts. After dinner, one of the youth counselors heard Alicia say that she and her cousin were going somewhere and they'd be right back. She even asked them to save her one of the gifts. She said, I will be back. You better give me something. She never returned to the party, though. At 11 o'clock that night, 3 kids were walking in a forested area between an elementary school and Highway 16, where they found Alicia's body. She had been stabbed to death. Police would release a sketch of a potential suspect later on, but it led them nowhere. Police do say that they have a suspect, but obviously no arrests have been made. In addition to their suspect, they are looking for a match to another woman's DNA at the scene. Intrigue. The deaths of Roxanne and Alicia happened while the Wilson family searched for Ramona Wilson's body, but shortly after her body was found, there was another case to solve. Lana Derrick, a 19-year-old from the Gitineau First Nation, was visiting her parents from college at their home in Terrace, British Columbia. She was in school about 3 hours away at North Community College studying forestry. Lana was seen a lot leading up to the moment she disappeared. She rode into Terrace with a friend, but after arriving and dropping off her belongings at her parents' house, she started walking around town. Her stepsister stopped and told her, she pulls up beside her in a car, and she's like, our dad has cash for you. And Lana's like, leave it at your apartment. I'll come get it. I'm walking. Whatever. Yeah, bitch. I don't need it. I don't need it right this second. So Lana showed up to her stepsister's house around 3 a.m., knocking on the door to get her cash. I would have said, I really wish you would have just taken it from me at the time. But this is good because we got another sighting. So her stepsister Clarice says that Lana at this time had clearly been drinking, but otherwise seemed okay. She does not recall seeing anyone else with Lana, no car, no headlights, nothing. Which I think walking was super typical, so she's probably she literally just walked here in the dark, drunk, to get her cash. Lana's parents did not panic when she didn't return home Saturday, assuming she had stayed at a friend's house. I also think we have to consider that this is a person who's in college, so they're used to not seeing her.
Yeah.
But by Tuesday, when she was not back or in school, they were very worried.
Fair.
They reported her missing, but police did not begin an investigation until almost a week later. A witness later came forward to say that they had seen her at a gas station on the south side of Highway 16 around 3 a.m. They watched her ride away in a blue car. There was no video footage from the gas station, but based on the witness testimony, police released sketches of two men that were seen with Lana. Lana's boyfriend from the time would die by suicide after, which placed some questions on him, but police ruled him out. Lana's case is still unsolved, and her body has not been found. A lot of the women who went missing were coming from difficult upbringings. Many were in foster care, were living on the streets, or were in families dealing with addiction. In 2001, a 29-year-old woman named Serena Abbotsway went missing from downtown Eastside Vancouver, an area known for its poverty, rampant drug use, and people doing what they must to survive. Serena had endured years of abuse in the foster system before finding foster parents who, although she was not living with them, she would call daily to check in. Her story almost mirrors one that would come soon after. Mona Wilson, 26 years old, and not to be mistaken for Ramona Wilson, who went missing about 7 years before, also went missing from downtown Eastside Vancouver. Witnesses said she was staggering along outside, clearly intoxicated, before getting into a car and riding away. Around this same time period, police received a tip from Lynn Ellingson that she had seen a woman hanging in the slaughterhouse of her boyfriend's pig farm.
Is her boyfriend Willie Picton?
He's Robert Picton.
Nuh-uh!
In fact, she had seen this years earlier in 1999, and a friend of hers called the tip in, but at the time, Lynn denied this. She said later that it was because she was afraid of her boyfriend. Yeah, if I saw a woman hanging in his slaughterhouse, I would be scared. She was afraid of her boyfriend, and she relied on him to afford her addiction. Robert Picton operated a pig farm in Port Coquitlam, about an hour from Vancouver. In 2002, the police raided the pig farm and found illegal firearms, as well as items that they believed could have belonged to victims. They collected handcuffs, women's clothing, and jewelry, an asthma inhaler that was prescribed to Serena Abbotsway, and samples of blood that would later be confirmed to belong to Mona Wilson. Police started piecing together old stories. In 1997, Picton had kidnapped an unknown woman and brought her back to his farm. She attacked him with one of his kitchen knives, and they both sustained serious stab wounds. She ran to the road, flagged down a car. They drove her to the hospital. While she was undergoing emergency surgery, Robert Picton was being treated for his wounds in the same hospital. An orderly working with Picton found a key in his pocket, which fit the handcuffs of their other patient, the assault victim. Crazy. So Picton was arrested and charged with attempted murder, assault with a weapon, and forcible confinement. Picton claimed that she was a drug-addicted hitchhiker who attacked him. After this, Investigators no longer considered her to be a competent witness, and the charges were dropped. And thus, Robert Picton continued to do what he do. He was what? What do you know?
Oh, lots. He put people through his meat grinder and gave it to grocery stores as pigs.
Robert did, or is there someone named Willie?
His middle name is Willie. Robert Willie Picton.
Oh, okay.
But he went by Willie. He's in the coloring book.
Sure.
He's also on my list of potential cases.
Well, you're only getting a sneak peek.
Maybe I'll tell you more another time.
Oh, he is a freaky looking person.
Yeah.
So he was arrested again on February 22nd, 2002 for 2 counts of murder, which would later turn into 26. For 2 more years, they searched the grounds of the farm where they would find the DNA of 33 different women. Robert Picton would be convicted for 6 out of 26 charges. But during his time in prison, he would confess to the murders of 49 women. He thought that he was confessing to his roommate, another detainee, but he was speaking to another undercover officer, which I love that Canada does this.
They did that on Brooklyn Nine-Nine in the episode we just watched. They had Amy go undercover in a prison, and Jake went undercover as like a doctor because Amy was like pregnant. She was fake pregnant in the prison. And so Jake kept calling her into like his office for like checkups, and she was like, "You have to stop calling me in here." And he's like, "But I'm so worried about you." But it's kind of fun.
Yeah. So the Picton Pig Farm became the largest crime scene in Canadian history. Robert Picton took advantage of women down on their luck, struggling with addiction and financial problems, and statistics show us that a lot of these women would have been Indigenous. Despite being about 4% of the federal population, Indigenous people make up 10% of overdose deaths in Canada. 25% of Indigenous people in Canada struggle with addiction compared to only 17% of non-Indigenous people. That same year, a Canadian lawyer and judge named David William Ramsey was indicted on multiple charges. While acting as a sitting judge, Ramsey was picking up and sexually assaulting Indigenous girls as young as 12 years old. Several of these girls and young women appeared in court to ensure that Ramsey would go away to prison. Most of them described his refusal to wear a condom during the assault and times that he had grown increasingly violent. One girl described that he smashed her head against the dashboard when she resisted. 6 weeks after his indictment, he attempted a suicide. He later pled guilty to 5 of 10 charges and was sentenced to 7 years in prison. 7 years? What the heck? But God is good. 4 years later, he died in prison of terminal cancer, which he had previously been denied day parole for. They said, "You got terminal cancer? We don't care. Die." That's my silver lining here. 25-year-old tree planter Nicole Hoare went missing from a gas station in Prince George in 2002. She was hitchhiking her way to visit her sister. The visit was a surprise so that they could go to the Smithers Midsummer Music Festival. Although her friends begged her not to hitchhike, she wanted so badly to surprise her sister that she insisted. Her friends decided that she was cautious and she trusted her instincts enough that she would not get in the car with anyone that she found suspicious. She wore a large camping backpack, and it was the middle of the day. So she was identifiable. When people realized that Nicole was missing, police were inundated with tips. This case was in the news everywhere. Everyone was willing to help. Searches were underway. And I guess this would be a good time to specify that Nicole Hoare is a white woman. Later that year, a man named Leland Switzer was arrested for murdering his brother, and he was sentenced to prison for the remainder of his life. He told police a couple of years later that he had actually stopped to pee outside of the gas station the night before Nicole Hoare went missing, or the night that Nicole Hoare went missing, just in case they found any of his DNA at the scene. You might find my urine from years ago. Don't worry. Since then, police have felt like he was good for the crime, but they have not gotten any more details or found Nicole's body. So, as far as like the general population, they were obviously much more interested in Nicole's case than they had been about any of these hundreds of Indigenous women that went missing. However, the police still fell short.
Yeah.
You got literally everything you needed, and you still flubbed it. Nice. In 2005, the RCMP finally put together a special task force for the Highway of Tears cases. The force was called EPANA. I don't know what it stands for. Team Commander Sergeant Ron Palta told author Jessica McDiarmid that they were looking for any commonalities that they could find between the unsolved cases of missing and murdered girls and women along the highway. He did decline to answer the current number of open cases on missing women or whether the police believe that these are largely committed by strangers or not. One might think, of course, they're looking for commonalities between the cases because many of the cases have been connected. Another serial offender who was looked at for crimes along the Highway of Tears was serial killer and rapist Bobby Jack Fowler. Canadian police looked into the American murderer for anywhere between 10 and 20 murders. Fowler went to prison in 1996 for an Oregon crime. EPANA began looking into him after his death in 2006. In 2012, they announced that his DNA matched some found on a 1974 victim, 16-year-old Colleen McMillan.
He looks like
Bobby Jack.
Yeah, he looks like Ross Geller.
You wanted to see? Did you look him up because he's American? You want to see if you knew him?
No.
Do you look up people the whole time?
Sometimes.
Like when I name a... Yeah, he does. He looks like a Seinfeld character.
Mm-hmm.
Like he should be in Seinfeld. Like many others, Colleen had been hitchhiking along the highway. This was pretty much the only option for people with no vehicle or ability to drive to get from town to town. Locals also say that a lot of people were driving through the town of Smithers, where Ramona Wilson went missing, and where Nicole Hoare was trying to get to a music festival from the U.S. to get to Alaska with large transport trucks. I'm not saying that's what happened with Bobby Jack Fowler, but like you think about how many, not only Canadian serial killers, how many just fucking Americans are going through here. I imagine that this is like pretty true beyond Smithers. This is pretty true for any city along the highway. So Tamara Chipman, 22 years old, was last seen hitchhiking on Highway 16 near the Prince Rupert Industrial Park on September 21st, 2005. Tamara was a part of the Wet'suwet'en First Nation. Tamara was remembered by her friends and family as someone who was funny and mischievous. She was close with her whole family, but she spent most of her time with her Aunt Gladys. Precious. Tamara had her son when she was 19. She had been missing for months before anyone really seemed to notice because her family in Prince Rupert thought she was with her family in Terrace, and her family in Terrace thought she was with her family in Prince Rupert. I'm unclear where her son was in all of this, possibly just with his father. I don't know. Police believe that they know what happened to Tamara because a woman had come forward confessing to seeing it all take place. She says that she and two men picked up Tamara hitchhiking that night, and one of the men started arguing with Tamara before he hit and strangled her. They pulled over and dumped her body. The witness said that this man went back to the scene to bury her body. Police did search this area, but they found nothing. And then eventually, all the suspects were dead, and they couldn't get any more information.
That's what happens when you wait to do your job.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I know. And I'm like, what is eventually?
Yeah.
How long did they wait? 14-year-old Ayla Sarah Cogier went to the mall in Prince George with her sisters and brother on February 2nd, 2006. Ayla and her family came from the Clately Tenay First Nation, and they were notoriously close. When they were at the mall, some friends of theirs invited them out to go drinking that night. You heard that right, 14-year-old, going drinking. This is what's happening. Tim, her brother, decided to go home, but Ayla and her sisters went to hang out. The next morning, Ayla's sisters returned home expecting that she would be there. I'm guessing they said, we're going out longer, and she was planning to go home. But when she was not there, the family immediately reported her missing. But police told them to come back in 78 hours if she hadn't turned back up. Later, though, in police reports, the RCMP would highlight the fact that the family waited 4 whole days to file an official missing persons report on February 6th. You little rats.
So you don't have to do your job?
What the heck? And also 78. Why 78? Weird. Ayla's mom, Audrey, had spoken out at one point saying that Ayla was last seen getting into a black van, although I'm not sure where she got this information, and it did not lead police anywhere. Ayla's body was found on February 10th, so only a few days later, in a ditch along the highway about 15 kilometers east of Prince George. The only of her own belongings found with her body was a necklace that her mother was able to identify. Ayla had died from a blow to the head. Police did find surveillance footage from gas stations that showed Ayla at 2 different points walking toward her house. None of these leads have led to anything, and her case remains unsolved. Unfortunately, her mother was killed in 2013 in a vehicle collision on Highway 16. Somebody look at those Redicott boys. I'm sus. The RCMP acknowledged in a 2014 report that there had been more than 1,200 missing and murdered Canadian Indigenous women between 1980 and 2012. In a 2015 documentary called Highway of Tears, one woman talked about seeing 2 to 3 new missing posts every single day on Facebook, and that her own list from these posts is at over 4,000 women and girls. She said, "Police, I do not believe you. I've done my own math."
Surprise.
In 2018, Ramona Wilson's cousin, Jessica Patrick, 18 years old, went missing near the highway after leaving for a party at the Mountain View Motel. The police told the family that she was probably fine, but just still out partying. She went missing on August 31st, but police did not start investigating until September 6th. Her family never bought that she was just partying for days when she had left her daughter at home. On September 15th, the family went out on their own search for her, and they found that her body had seemingly been tossed off of a road leading to a ski hill. She was found down a slippery embankment lying next to a discarded washing machine. The current statistic is that Indigenous women make up 16% of all of Canada's homicide victims and 11% of Canada's missing women, despite Indigenous people only making up about 4% of the population, and Indigenous women like 2%. But they make up 16% of homicides, 11% of missing women. It is also notable that Indigenous women are less likely to be murdered by a partner or a family member and are more likely to be murdered by a casual acquaintance or a stranger, which I think is like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I also think like when you think about America, and I'm not saying these are correct statistics, but you think like Indigenous women are more likely to be killed by people in their family, but also we've like isolated Indigenous people into reservations and they like govern themselves. And so it's like maybe duh.
Yeah.
But it's like here where Indigenous people are like quote unquote integrated into society and are like not separated in reservations, they're just being killed. And like, they're not being killed by people who love and care about them. They're being killed by people who look at them and think, I can kill her.
Right.
So
scary.
Nuts. I do not usually do this, but this time I want to shout out some of my sources, which did diligent work to tell the stories of these women and girls, despite the fact that, like, in the news, most of these stories are not widespread. Also, they talked about that, like, Jessica McDiarmid in her book Highway of Tears was really important to my research, and she talked about, like, that when these women's stories were told, it was never, like, about who they were as a person. And my favorite place that did that is a website called the Hue and Cry, and they wrote about most, if not all, of the Ipana and Highway of Tears cases individually. You can find, like, they each have their own page, and it's all about who they are as people and who their family believed them to be, and it was very helpful for me. And that's it.
Good
different. Different style. Yeah. I'm so sorry to break into Robert Picton, but you have more.
Yeah.
I didn't get into no grinding.
That man is nerds.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think also, like, we think in America, like, missing and murdered Indigenous women statistics are so high because their reservations are their own governing bodies, and, like, they have different police forces and different like things for that. But, like, I think this goes to show that they would probably be looked into either way.
Yeah. And I think that, like, again, that's where I say, like, maybe we don't even know the actual statistics, because, like, it's not like Indigenous people do not live amongst white people, like, but I think, like, yeah, you hear all of these things about, like, that the reason there is so little justice in reservations and in Indigenous communities is because, like, they can all just be like, shh, like, whatever, like, we govern ourselves, like, no one's gonna look into this, blah, 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 blah. But it's also, like, a really easy way for white people to sit back and be like, that's what's happening in their communities.
Right.
And yeah, like, a good example that, like, frankly, it would be happening and police would be turning a blind eye.
Right.
Wherever. I think it's so crazy that residential schools were happening till 1997. That's nuts.
When I burst forth into the world.
Yeah, Mary ended residential schools in Canada. Wow.
And JonBenet Ramsey's case. What did I do for JonBenet Ramsey?
I don't remember. Something in April of 1997. Gosh, Mary, you're so famous.
Okay. I saw a TikTok the other day, and it was this girl was like, I'm so sorry, but I just think I have the best birthday ever. And like when people, like, ask me what my birthday is, I just get so proud to say the date, because it just is such a good date. And it was like April 17th, and people were commenting on it, and they were like, I fear you're just an Aries. So sorry.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, my birthday is April 18th, and I've always felt that way as well. And I can confirm it's just because you're an Aries.
Yeah. I love my birthday, but it's because it's actually good numbers.
1222.
1222. Any thoughts? Anything else?
No. Sad.
No sad.
A lot of different people.
Yeah,
Stories.
I like worried that, like, that's very different than what we do, and that, like, obviously I'm not really doing anyone justice individually by, like, doing it that way, but I needed it to be the point that, like, yo, you're gonna get tired of hearing me start a new person's name. And, like, I honestly beg all of you to go to the Highway of Tears Wikipedia page and just see how much scrolling you have to do to see how many cases I was like, I can't even touch a fifth of these.
Yeah.
But I was like, but I must write in there. An entire family went missing.
Yeah.
What the heck?
Have you seen that video of like a woman in court and she's like facing her sister's killer and he like stabbed her sister like 130 times and she makes him sit while she drops 130 rocks into a jar and he just has to sit there for the whole time and he's like squirming and he's like so uncomfortable and she was like, okay, I'm done, like now you know how long my sister had to endure what you did.
Ugh, that's gonna be so hard for her to do.
Yeah.
Well,
sometimes you just gotta feel it.
Yeah. Okay. Bye.